yeah, what are some of the gaps that you see teams leaving wide open?
Yeah, sure. And when you say 30 years, man, that goes pretty fast. It's hard to believe how quickly that time goes. But maybe if I could, let me give you a little bit of my, over that period of time, kind of a little bit of about how we got into this because
Yeah,
this
please
whole
do.
area has evolved. Yeah, a little bit in how it's evolved, how I've seen it evolved anyway. Because I think the gaps are part of the outcome of how vendor management as a business function has kind of grown to where it is now. But so I actually got my start in public accounting. So I'm a CPA or an ex CPA, I guess you want to think about it that way. Um, Working with organizations, doing financial audits and things like that. But then I kind of switched over and started running our consulting practice. And as I was doing that, we were doing a lot of policy and procedure development, and then started getting into procurement. And this was probably in the mid 1990s, so it was a little while ago, right? So back then, everything was focused around sourcing, maverick spend, um, you know, negotiating. It was all about price negotiations, right? So let's get the best price we can. A lot of beating up of suppliers and vendors to try to maximize pricing, but it was all about cost and cost management. And that was our foray, or my foray, into kind of the vendor management space was through procurement, really, but primarily around sourcing and cost control, right? But then as we started doing more of this work, and I left public accounting, and that's when I started a consultancy that eventually ended up becoming vendor centric. Now we're continuing to do a lot of that procurement work, but then I would say, things started to evolve a bit more beyond just that sourcing focus, and folks were starting to talk more about third party risk, starting to talk a little bit more about contract management, but still pretty isolated. Daniel, you still have the procurement folks thinking more around sourcing and cost control, contract management. Let's more around the nuts and bolts of the terms and conditions of the contract and trying to manage towards deliverables, things like that. But it was really, I would say, maybe 10 years ago or so when I started to see the merging of this. In the US here, some of that was driven by regulatory compliance. So a lot of the banking industry and things around third party risk and third party risk management, even though it was pretty cybersecurity focused, started to creep in. The procurement folks started thinking about risk more. I think the contract folks wanted to get more involved with the risk folks and procurement as well. So the whole thing is kind of slowly and eventually brought these different operational areas together, where I think now what we're seeing is that as organizations, or the clients that we're working with anyway, are looking at this, they're not looking at it in silos as much as they used to, where procurement versus contract management versus third party risk. They're really thinking about it as broader vendor management, and how do we kind of bring those operational areas all together under one umbrella. So back to your question around the biggest gaps, I think that frankly is still the biggest gap that we're seeing, which is these the to manage vendors through that whole life cycle. There's still all these different siloed operational areas that are difficult to bring together under one common approach, right? So procurement has their policies and procedures, contracting has theirs, third party risk has theirs. Then you have compliance that comes into the mix. You have information security and cybersecurity risks that they're bringing into the TPRM. So you've got all these different kind of moving pieces that sit in different silos within the organization. So I think the biggest gap right now is companies trying to figure out, all right, we want to take this more strategic approach, but we're set up operationally with all these silos over here. So how do we kind of step back and look at this at 30,000 feet and start to bring all those different groups together under a common framework, under a coordinated set of policies and procedures to be able to really manage this thing holistically rather than separate in different areas of operations.